Of course, there are predictions that are obviously that will start, and one of those organizations that often comes up with those predictions is the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, the CSIR, which often does those predictions of the polls, but only that will happen after about 10 to 15% of the results are in the local government election. Pravesh Debba, who is with the CSIR, joins me now live on this. Pravesh, a very good evening to you. Thanks indeed for your time. So what can we expect, or can the audience expect after about 10 to 15% of that local government election votes are in?
Thanks, Cassandra, for also inviting us. What we've done is the CSR, in partnership with the SABC, we've developed a mathematical model which is able to predict, quite accurately what the final outcome would be for the local general elections. And this is for the top political parties. So as you mentioned, when we do receive around about 10 to 15% of the voting districts being declared, the CSR can, quite accurately make predictions about as to what the final outcome would be. But these will also be for the top political parties.
Yeah. Talk to us about the accuracy of this model that you use. I remember the last time there were some surprises. Was it in the city of Johannesburg? That was the DA and the ANC. There had been predictions that were being made. Some got it all wrong. And in eThekwini as well, where the results themselves had been declared, I think it was with about 70%, if you could correct if I'm wrong.
No, that is absolutely correct. So just to go over that, in Johannesburg, in the 2016 local government elections, I think it was it was DA and the ANC that was actually running very close to each other, and in fact, more in the beginning, DA had majority vote for Johannesburg compared to ANC, but at a little later stage, they started to swap around, and people were not was not or did not know what the final outcome would be. But with the CSR model, with as little as 5% of the data of the voting districts being counted, we were able to quite accurately predict what the final outcome would be. And we were predicting that, the ANC would be the majority rule for Johannesburg. And that was round about 3:30, if I remember correctly, it was around about 3:30 in the morning. And for eThekwini, like you mentioned, what had happened was the voting districts were held. The results for the voting districts were held back, and they were only released, towards the afternoon of the next day. But again, from very early in the morning, CSR was able to predict what the final outcomes would be for the top political parties for eThekwini.
Yeah. Pravesh, it's very different, though, when you have to project for a local government election in comparison when you have to project for a national election, what the possible outcomes would be. Talk us a bit through that. As I indicated a bit earlier on, it would be that 10 to 15% for the local government. That's very different for the national election, is it?
Yes, that's correct. So for the national elections, because we are predicting at a much higher level, at a national level, the provincial level, and also the metros. We'll be looking at the metros as well. So because of that, we are able to quite accurately predict when there's around about 5 to 10% of the data that comes in. But for the local government elections, it becomes more difficult. There's a number of additional parties as well. But the main thing is that we are looking at smaller areas.
Yes.
And because we are looking at smaller areas, we need at least 10 to 15% of the data to be in order to give a fairly accurate prediction.
Pravesh Debba, thank you very much indeed for joining us from the CSIR. Of course, one of the organisations on the predictions of the local government elections. Of course, after a certain percentage of those votes have come in. Thanks indeed.